this album is literally drenched in a proverbial blood. And I've been kind of keeping quiet about this for 40 years, but now that it's coming, now that it's about to come out, the proverbial shit shovel is coming out full steam. I'm Arthur Alexander, and we are in my studio in Burbank, California, doing this interview about the record that never was. Teenage heartbreak. What will it take just to make you see? One alone is one too many for me. Don't you understand? It's yours in the end. You better realize you gotta look at you see. Teenage heartbreak. I guess it's from my life and another chance. I can't fix it all in the dark. Teenage heartbreak. Tear me apart. You should have gone right from the start. I don't wanna hear your lies no more. I'm getting tired of waiting at your door. Part of the vision that I had was to have a band which ended up pretty unique in the way it was set up, and in a way we projected and express ourselves musically. What I mean by that is I had this idea. Every other band around you had a lead singer, or as in case of the Beatles, for instance, they had two lead singers. I always wanted to have, for that band, the vision that I had was to have three lead singers, no lead guitar, as opposed to lead guitar, your typical traditional division, rhythm guitar, lead guitar, bass. I wanted to have both of us, me and Joey, performing both roles. So either one of us could play lead or rhythm, and our arrangements even were done that way, were literally in the course of a song. We were like, I used to joke about it, we were like a soundman's nightmare. Part of it was also that it was very important to this whole picture who the other guys were, their personalities, their stage presence. And even though I might have been, the driver of the band, my idea was to make sure that all of us are equal in that sense, so it doesn't come off like, Arthur and his guys, but it's us, the band. So it was really on a visual side of things, it was really important to me that, there were these personalities as opposed to kind of like this blank picture of four guys. Jed had a fantastic personality on drums, twirling sticks. I mean, I've never seen a guy who can play drums and chew gum at the same time in two different rhythms to begin with. And he was really visual, fantastic, and a lot of people actually copped his stuff, just from watching him on our circuit. And then there was me, the thinker, the reserved one, and this and that. Then there was Ricky, the crazy one. And then there was Joey, the cute one that the girls were swooning over, the Teen Idols kind of a guy. Visually, that was exactly what I was looking for, that I wanted to have this band look like. Musically, which is very important, which was, needless to say, very important to me too, was that even though I was the principal songwriter in the band, the other guys, as time went on, I encouraged them to write songs too, I wanted them to feel vested and kind of feel like they own this thing too. It's not just me and my songs and that's it. But the fact is that, while I was a principal songwriter, even back then, either I already knew in the middle of a song who's going to sing that song, that this was a song for Ricky, or I would say, I was going to write it, and like if it was to be my song, by the time I was finished writing, I says, no, this is not an Arthur song, this is Ricky's song, or this is Joey's song, or this is, you know, combination of the two. Like, for instance, one guy was going to sing verses and one guy was going to sing the bridge, or something, you know, a combination of the two. So all that stuff, and if you listen to Teenage Heartbreak, our first album, you can clearly hear it, and that's, you know, this variety of voices and different permutations. This was all happening. So, as I said, this was all part of what Sorrow's identity was all about. Sorrows, because of what we were doing, the kind of material we were doing, functioning in this punk new wave circuit of New York, again, we were kind of like extension of the Puppies in the sense that we were never truly accepted by the in crowd. You know, we were never the hip guys, you know, even though we were very much followed. Every gig that we played, the Heartbreakers, the Ramones, Blondie, they were always there to check us out. But as a band, you know, and as part of the clique, we were never part of the clique. So all of a sudden, all these bands are playing all these things, and a boof, and we're signed, and we have the, you know, just like everybody else, the main goal for every band and their mother was to get a deal, get a label deal. Well, without going through that, you know, to make a long story short, all of a sudden we are CBS recording artists. Okay, so we did the first album, Teenage Heartbreak, which was a great album, critically acclaimed. We got a great reaction. People were like really on it. And came the time to do the second album. For reasons I don't quite remember at this point, John Luongo, who was the president of Pavilion, actually co-produced the first album with two other guys, Mark Milchman and Elliot Apter. And when it came time for the second album, the idea was that we should find another producer. John was really getting involved with running the label, and he felt or something that we should find an independent producer, so rather than involving him again in the day-to-day production of the album.
The label was Pavilion Records, which was a CBS imprint, I guess they called it at the time, or a boutique thing. And so it was distributed and run by CBS, but it was John's personal label. And John had a partner, Steve Machat Jr., or maybe not Jr., maybe just Steve Machat. And his father was a big-time, you know, heavy hitter.
They were both lawyers, was like father and son practice. And Stephen Machat was kind of like a, I guess, co-manager, figurehead, working on behalf of the label that we were signed to. And his father was a real old-timer show business lawyer, you know, with a long history of practice. You know, his clients were like Leonard Cohen, Phil Spector, and on down the line, you know. So
the fact of the matter is, I think it was like when they told me about Shel Talmy, they mentioned a name. I think it was like Shelton who. You know, I've never been a liner notes guy.
You mean the Shel Talmy? He says, yeah. And, you know, I said, why are you saying that? He says, well, because, you know, I represent the guy, and I could get him to produce your album.
And then they went into this, you know, both Arthur and Jed, I believe, and maybe Ricky went into like all these great things that he had done, you know, the Kinks, the Who, you know, Small Faces, blah, 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 on and on. And, you know, and I've since learned that what he did was he went out and found bands that were like on the cusp, or that were really had songs but were like not really quite doing anything. And London in those days, in the 60s, I guess, was like, you know, kind of like New York when we got signed. You know, everybody was out trying to sign every new wave pop punk band that was out there, and it was obviously like that there at that time. So what happened is he would sign bands to production deals, and then, you know, produce them. And producing them meant making albums of that, you know, that he wanted to make, that weren't necessarily what the band wanted.
So there we were, all set to go to England to do the second album with none other but Shel Talmy, the legendary producer. Who could have thought? Who could have dreamed that?
I think from the get-go, from those very first pre-production sessions, I'm pretty sure that he formed the whole concept in his mind that we were going to be replaced in the studio, which was his what do you call it, his calling card, it was his modus operandi. He did that, and he used ringers in the studio to play the parts that the bands couldn't play, which was really insulting when you think about it, because I thought we did a pretty darn good job of playing our songs. And anyway, so again, that's hindsight looking at that, but I think he just kind of just went through the motions with those pre-production sessions, and that didn't really break down like the parts we'd be playing, and the way you layer it in the studio. You just do the rhythm tracks and the overdubs. We never went through rehearsing like what was going to be a rhythm basic track, what was going to be overdubs. We never did any of that kind of stuff. That was like in the band's mind. We rehearsed that, mainly Arthur and I, because the two guitarists, but it was never part of the conversation with Shell.
Before we left, somebody told me at the label or something that Shell Talmy already left for London. This was like 2 weeks ahead of us, or maybe a week ahead of us. That Shell already left for London, and he flew Concorde to England, because he left early because he had some kind of a book that he wrote at the time, so he left early to promote the book and some book signings and this and that, and that he just happened to fly British Airways Concorde. So, well, that's nice, wish we could, but hell, I'll take a boat if I have to. I'm good, So then came our time to leave. We fly to London, to Heathrow Airport, 4 guys with earrings, leather jackets, 18,000 guitars with us. And as we're going through the airport, we're going through the Her Majesty's Customs. I forget exactly how it went. I think just simply sequentially, it just so happened. And all of a sudden, I turn around and Ricky is missing. So I'm like, what the hell? What happened? Well, what happened is Her Majesty's officials apparently didn't take too kindly to this picture of the 4 guys in leather jackets and all these rockers, waltzing to the thing, and decided to stop him and ask him, why are you here? Okay? So now we have a situation, 3 of us are on one side, Ricky is somewhere, we don't know what's going on. Basically, all of a sudden, I discovered that the reason this is all happening is because Ricky spilled the beans that we're here to record an album with Shel Talmy, and the next logical question was from Her Majesty's Customs official, where are your work permits? Our great label didn't even bother to take care of that. So if you're coming here to record an album, you're working here. Where are your work permits? Okay? So I came up with this fib that we're not really recording an album, that our producer is here on vacation, or he is here on business and this and that, and we are here on vacation. We just came to work with him in preparation for this thing because he's here and we're in the United States. So since he couldn't be with us, we decided to take a vacation and come here and basically spend the time with her, homing, just refining the album, working on pre-production, and yada yada yada.
We got our passports back, and first we got the visa stamped okay, and then it was canceled, declined, and then we got this other one, this like 6-week visa, it was like only for 6 weeks or something, and we had to get out of the country in that time. It wasn't like your regular whatever couple of months or something. Anyway, so that's how that all worked out, and eventually, and so that kind of put it was probably a good foreseeing of how the whole thing was going to go, or foreshadowing or something. It was just not pretty. A pretty way to start the whole thing.
We got to London. We met for dinner, and Shell was regaling us with all his stories from his glory days and stuff like that, and we were like, and what happened, and how did you do this and how did you do that, we were like, little puppies, literally, like they're just worshiping at the altar of God. It was great. It was great. He was giving us all these anecdotal stories about the Who and the Kings and the this and the that. Fantastic. The next day or something, we started recording. We went to the studio, and one of the first things that I noticed was, in a room where all the tapes were being held, the storage room with all of our multi-track tapes, as big boxes, with the big spines. They were all named Happy Faces with a smiley face on it. And I said, that's how, yeah, we decided to keep it like on a download in case, for whatever reason, the immigration raids the place and discovers that you guys are actually working on this stuff and that this whole thing is just a bunch of bullshit. You know, they kept all the tapes with a smiley face, no sorrows in sight. We basically disappeared from the horizon. There was no sight of sorrows being in England. We were recording as happy faces. You know, I guess, yeah, it's a kind of a sorrows, happy faces. Yeah, I can see that. Okay, so the first day of the recording, we're setting up and we're nervous as hell. I mean, sorry, but I mean, we were just like so subconscious and like totally off of our game. Like there's this guy in the control room, and we're going to be playing to God. I mean, we were really, really nervous and like really stressed out. So we set up and we started recording. This is first day of recording.
It was me playing my parts, Arthur playing his parts, and everybody, Jeff behind the drums, and Ricky and bass. And we were, it was a nice sized open room, and we were all kind of like in eyesight of one another. Our amplifiers were all baffled off in different parts of the room, but we could all see everybody, and we're all, we're just playing, and it like playing our parts. We kind of like kept it simple on the simple side, but most of our stuff, the songs that when we perform live, neither Arthur or I are just playing rhythm or lead all the way through. There's like a lot of both going on all the time, and that was one of the great, one of the things I loved about being in that band and playing that music. There was like, you could be pounding out a chord in 1 second and just doing this kind of little melodic thing and then going back to the chord. It's constantly, we didn't use pedals a lot, but you used a little three-way switch on the guitars, for volume or whatever. And it was just great that way. So we played that way for the most part.
At some point in time, Shell comes out of the room, out of the control room, and comes into the studio area and calls me aside and says, would you mind if I got another drummer? And Jet, he's not exactly your metronome. We knew that to begin with, but he's a phenomenal drummer, and you just work with it. If you're a producer and you work with the band, you know what you're in for, okay? Or you should know what you're in for, and decide either up front that put that out, saying, guys, we have a problem. For the record, I would like to use a different drummer because your drummer, has a problem keeping time or fluctuating or whatever. No, of course, none of that was said. So when he comes to me, I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I said, well, let me talk to Jet before I say yes or no. So I go over to Jet, who's sitting behind the drum kit, and I said, Jet, here's the deal. I'm not going to say yes until you're okay. You're the band. And poor Jet, he looked like he was about to have a heart attack, and just somebody just took this huge boulder off his back, and he said, yeah, sure. And I expected him to like either destroy the studio or throw a shit fit or something. In the meantime, the poor guy was so relieved because he was so stressed out, which of course only exacerbated whatever deficiencies he might have had, only exacerbated that. So he was absolutely relieved. I was relieved that the guy didn't punch me in the face and everybody else and set the studio on fire or something. So I went back to Shell and said, yeah, okay, let's Jet's okay with that. Okay.
Me and Arthur were not happy about it. Ricky, again, I'm not sure where he was, but just basically none of us were thrilled with this idea. Just kind of like a unique kind of player.
And at this point, I have to say this was the biggest mistake of my life. One of the things that I will never forgive myself for doing, agreeing to this. Okay. Next thing we know, literally within an hour or so, there's already a session drummer in the studio getting ready. How do you get a session drummer like literally on the spot if you weren't planning on that to begin with, or laying down the foundation, or making sure you got that in your back pocket? I mean, I'm talking from the hindsight now.
And obviously, there was a deal here that was made, which shall tell me that it was his show.
Anyway, so this guy arrives, nice enough chap, really sweet guy, and everything else. Sits behind the drum kit. So we start playing with this guy, and sure enough, the timing is okay, maybe better than Jet's, but the guy's like a studio hack, I mean, nothing against him, but that's not the point. It's like no character. I mean, Jet has a style. This guy has no style, For all I know, he just could have come from a, Yardley soap commercial. I mean, he's a studio drummer, you put some charts in front of him and he plays. That's it.
So this other drummer comes in, and had he known the stuff ahead of time? I don't know. It's possible. It's a good possibility. Guy was a really quick study. Guy had like 10 tom toms, so like we immediately despised them, and and just everything was dull and thuddy, and
But the whole flair, the whole fire of the band is gone. So we're like, okay, what do we do? Let's roll with it. So we proceeded. Jed's happy like a pig in shit, because he doesn't have to deal with this anymore, that the pressure is off. We recorded, I can't remember if we did a couple of days or something, recording all the tracks or something. My plan, I had like 3 or 4 guitars with me because part of my idea was, I intended to basically record, like, as far as my parts go, basic scratch tracks, and then actually do the actual tracks later on, maybe substitute an electric guitar for acoustic. I had my acoustic 12-string, this, that, and the other thing. But, for the basic tracks, I wanted to be very organic, so we played like as a band instead of just, having a drummer play to the click track and then the bass player comes in and then the guitar player comes in. So we play as a band, So I played my parts.
And Shell just kept stopping him. And for whatever reason, he didn't like how he was playing it. He didn't think it was done in time. And he eventually said, I want to get somebody else to play this part. And it was not a difficult part. It was just the introduction to the song is what it was. And Arthur did it fine. He's done it fine forever. I don't know what he was looking for, but whatever it was, he got this other guy. And this kind of like was this, I guess Arthur saw the writing on the wall at this point.
All of a sudden, Shell announced saying that, I want to work with Joey, so the 3 of you guys, why don't you just go, like, do some sightseeing and this and that, and I wanted to work with Joey for a couple of days or something on the vocals, and you guys kind of, you can go.
Arthur and I had 2 different, come from very, very, very different backgrounds as guitarists, and I grew up, learning how to play, like, first of all as a drummer, and then when I eventually switched over to guitar, like, it was like, it was Jimmy Page and Jimi Hendrix and Jeff Beck more later on, and that kind of like, heavier, ballsier, raunchier feel, and Arthur came from a much more melodic, chordy, uh, pop, he had more pop sensibilities than I did. I mean,
All right. So off we went, you know.
and I think that's what really made Sorrows, was like, these very different backgrounds, Arthur being so melodic, and I mean, ballsy, not to say he doesn't have, chops and balls, and appreciate the raunchy stuff too, but for the most part, that's, just my take on it all the time. And that friction, that conflict, and also the combination of things really worked well, I think, in a lot of these songs. Uh, and what kind of happened in the recording of Love Too Late, what happened is, I ended up attempting to emulate Arthur's parts. I played my parts the way I usually do, and I was trying to do Arthur's parts, and I didn't really know all of Arthur's parts. I mean, not to play them, to hear them, yes, but to be able to give it the same feel and texture and everything that he would have, even with the guitars that he would have used, which I didn't use. What happened is, the album was weak for that aspect, for the fact of, or for the lack of Arthur's playing being in there. And Shell, heard what I was doing, and I guess just figured that would be fine.
But at some point in time, a day or two or something later, we get together in our hotel or something, and Joey is kind of a little squirmy and kind of, that's how I remember it anyway, kind of uneasy, and he basically says that Shell had him sing all the songs, meaning my songs, Ricky's songs, and his songs. Everything is being sung by Joey. So we're like, what the fuck? Why? That's, we're in shock basically. What do we do? We don't know what to do. So I remember we had this meeting in my room, and we kind of like, poor Joey, like I don't know what he was feeling inside, and like it's never been really clear to me what happened even before we left. Was there some kind of how did this happen without, all of a sudden we're confronted with the fact that we have a whole new band. We have a lead singer now.
Arthur didn't do any vocals on that record. What happened was, I remember singing my couple of songs on that, and then he asked me to do Arthur's vocals on either Christabel or Crying Time or something, just to just like a scratch vocals, filler or something like that, just see how it sounds, just as a placeholder or something like that. We'll get it worked out. Arthur will come back in, and then it went from one song to two songs to eventually all of Arthur's vocals.
So we don't know what to do. So we had a meeting in my room, and we're talking about it, and I said, look, this is a really fucked up situation, I don't know what's going on, who came up with this idea and why this is happening, but what do we do? We're in a foreign country, essentially illegally at this point, considering what just transpired a couple of days before at the airport, this is before email, cell phones and text messages, and like, what do we do? Do I fire this guy and we call the label and say to our boss, label boss, get your ass over here and we'll produce it together because I don't want this guy. Do we like really blow this shit up? I mean, we don't know what to do. On the other hand, it's like maybe this is the price of admission. Maybe this is what we need to do, and kind of take one for the team. And the next album, this album will be this huge success. Let him do whatever he wants to do to make this a success, and the next album will have our. Anyway, we go back and forth at this and that, and I finally said, unless we like really blow this shit up, there's no way out of this. And the fact remains, we put our faith in this guy for a reason, because we value him, his opinions, his accomplishments, his history. Let's just see what happens, okay? And we just left it like that. And I just remember there was some time in between also that, so Joey kept going back for more or something, to do something while we were doing our shopping and sightseeing. And eventually came the day where we all were in a studio and basically the work was finished. The album was finished. So I said to the guys, let's not do anything. I want to hear what I'm about to hear. And I have to say to you guys that my opinion is that if what I hear is really fucking great, then we need to all squash our collective egos and me in particular, okay? And just say, you know what? You may not like it, but this shit is great, okay? And if this is our stepping stone to whatever it is that we want to do, well, then bend over and take one for the team, and that's it, If I don't like what I hear, I have no idea what to do. But let's just leave it at that, and let's see what happens. So I remember we were in the studio in the control room, and they're playing this tape of all the songs now, basically finished, just rough mixes off the board, like. And I'm standing next to the tape recorder, and Shell is sitting on the couch with his assistant, this girl Jan Gooding, and guys are standing around. Like I still have the photograph in my mind. And Shell is sitting at the console, at the mixing console with the engineer, and bopping his head and tapping. What a great stuff. And I'm standing next to the tape machine, listening to the monitors, and as tape rolls on, I can't fucking believe my ears. Not only forget the fact that all of a sudden the whole idea of what we are as a band is gone. We have a lead singer. All the vocal parts, harmonies, everything else are sung by some studio hacks that he hired. We're not singing a note, okay? One of the songs, I don't know how that happened. One of the songs that Ricky actually wrote, it's the only song that he's singing, okay? I don't know how he even got that far, because I wasn't there. I was running around. I can't remember that. Another song which I specifically wrote for Ricky and him, and Joey singing the whole thing, plus all these singing angels around him. Another song that I wrote specifically for Ricky and Joey, again, for Ricky to sing verses and for Joey to sing bridges. Shell had this great idea, which I thought was great, just not for our band, of having it sung in a certain way that kind of sounded like the Beach Boys, very high falsetto, kind of a voice. None of us in this band can sing this way.
He brought in the guys who were singing backup harmonies for us, or the ringers. He brought in to do harmonies were really good. They sounded kind of like the Bee Gees after the after the castrations, they had these really high voices, and which Soros, Ricky can hit high notes. Me and Arthur, no way. We're both, alto baritone, and Ricky can get up there occasionally. So, in a lot of ways, the vocals on that record were not Soros, and especially, it didn't occur to me at the time, but to have ringers come in and sing the lead vocal on a song like Breaking My Heart was like really, such a, you could tell at that point, like Shell really only cared about the song and the possibilities of the song and what, the value of you might get from the song, from that song and performance and everything. Didn't care that it had squat to do with the band.
Then all these synthesizers and shit all over the place. I mean, it's like all of a sudden I'm hearing this. This is like starting to sound like Doobie Brothers meets Manilow on a bad night. So I'm standing there just absolutely stunned, because Sorrows as a band essentially disappeared. And I'm standing there, the guys are looking at me, I'm looking at the guys, and I don't know what to do. I'm looking at that machine and I'm just thinking, like, all these thoughts are going through my head, like, should I just press record erase button or just rip the tape of the thing and throw it in his face? Should I throw him down the stairs and call New York and say, this gig is over, get your ass over here and we're starting from scratch? I don't know what to do,
I don't know the nature of, I don't know what the conversations that Arthur had with John. I do know that it was, at least it had to do with, if you're not going to go along with this, it's going to happen anyway. All right. So, this album is being made with or without you is what he got from Luongo.
I don't know why I did that, but I basically wrote a note on the legal pad that this is absolutely unacceptable. I understand that you're doing whatever it is that you're doing for whatever reasons. I'm walking out of this. I want no part of this. I am asking that you erase my guitar parts. You did all this. Do more of this. You can have somebody else play. I don't care. I want nothing to do with this record. And I walked out. And I never came back.
It just became really clear that this was like sounding less and less like Sorrows as time went on. You've heard in the story, heard about or seen in studios. It's a regular thing where a lot of people will sing a background part, but then, and they're all gathered around the mic and you're singing in his high voices, low voices, blah, blah, blah. But then later, when you hear the record or the finished product, it's like barely there. It's like supporting, it's underneath everything. But in this case, they were like very prominent, and it was because they were parts that Shell had kind of worked out for the song. They weren't what Sorrows would do. It's something that a producer would do, and so there was that piece of it.
And the album was done. Then we have this meeting with Stephen Machad, the attorney, and John Luongo, the label boss. The record just came back from LA where it was mastered, and they're playing this to us. Remember, we had a meeting at Stephen Machad's apartment somewhere on swanky Upper West Side or East Side, wherever he was living at the time. And he's playing this record, and all of us are sitting there, and needless to say, our faces are not exactly beaming with joy.
And it was just that sick feeling in the pit of your stomach when you realize, and I'm liking some stuff, and but overall, it's like, something. This is just not us. We sacrificed. The way I look at it, we really sacrificed a lot in not fighting for what we wanted. In hopes that maybe at the end there would have been some reward. And we listened to this record, and like I say, it was good in parts. Sonically, it was a bit of an improvement over the first record. Um, but the unsorrows aspects of it were so hyped, it like was really hard to hear through that, for us to hear beyond that.
So Steve gets in my face kind of and say like, what's the matter? You don't like it? You know, like what's the problem? I said, funny you should ask me. I think that question should have been asked before we even left, not now. So if you're asking me this question, is no, I don't. Okay, because essentially what you did is you went behind our back, you completely destroyed the band. This is not us. So consequently, what we have here is you have a record that has nothing to do with the band, and now you have a band that wants and has nothing to do with the record. So guess what's going to happen? On our next gig and moving forward, we're going right back to being Sorrows. Three lead singers singing all the songs they were supposed to be. And how do you feel right now? What are you going to tell to all these people that you're going to be promoting this album to, where this fucking thing doesn't sound anything like what they're going to come out and see live? Well, then what do you want me to do? You want me to put it on a shelf? You know, kind of like, what's your problem, you know? And I said, well, you know what? You do whatever the fuck you want to do. Again, let me say this to you. This is the question you should have asked me before, not after. And that's basically what precipitated essentially a demise of the band and beginning of the end, because we did exactly what I said. We went right back to being the band that we are. They were livid about this. The reception to the album when it came out was exactly what I expected, and maybe not what they expected, but it was exactly that. I remember talking to one of the guys at the label who became a friend of mine in a way, and I remember we were talking at lunch one time. You know, the record was obviously going nowhere, and he said, you know, he was responsible for, like, you know, promotion and radio play and stuff like that. And he says, look, Arthur, I'm doing the best I can, but I'll be very honest with you. With Teenage Heartbreak, the doors were opening before I even knocked. Okay, with this, I can't tell you how many PDs, program directors said, you know, I'm not going to play this. This is shit. Okay? So, you know, this started at the same time, you know, problems started within the band. Um, there were alcohol and drugs in play. And the album came out as it was supposed to come out. We kind of played along in this charade in a sense that, you know, well, first of all, remember, this is pre-internet, pre-anything, so there was really not much that we could do in terms of publicly raising stink or doing anything, you know. So on the one hand, we played along with this bullshit, you know, because we felt, okay, well, we already have it, we may as well see what's going on with this, see it through, okay. But on the other hand, as a band, we went right back to how we were before, which is all three of us singing again the songs on this album being sung by the people who were supposed to have been singing them, and they hated it because obviously that was not their idea of what this band was supposed to be now. They just forgot to give us the memo.
I started feeling guilty about my part in this. You know, I really did. I felt like you know, it was like you know, I felt guilty. It was like just a general sense of guiltiness. I wouldn't put my finger on it. I wouldn't say I did anything wrong. I didn't do anything without the band's blessing. I didn't, but the outcome was just so, not worth not worth it, not worth the sacrifice, not worth the whatever.
That album was called Love Too Late, and it is for that reason that what's going to be coming out now is going to be called Love Too Late, the real album. And the reason is very simple, because essentially, if you have that album, the original album, you are basically listening to a fake. Okay, this is not a band. This is basically a hoax foisted by the record company using Joey as a lead singer and just some bunch of studio hacks and just doing our songs. The only thing as I like to say, the only thing that survived this album are the songs. It's kind of almost a testament. Maybe that's not so humble of me to say, but it's kind of like a testament to what a great song is. A great song is something that will survive what these songs went through and still emerged. You can tell it's a great song. But artistically speaking, and as a musician, as a creator, or whatever you want to call it, some fancy words, I gotta tell you, this is probably as close to a rape as I will ever come to know what that feels like. Because when I listen to this, and admittedly I try to limit that, I try to limit it over all these years to absolute minimum, but every time I listen to it, I feel violated.
The record, didn't seem to go anywhere, and that was it. I don't know what discussions were had, but all I know is that we weren't working with Pavilion. We were trying to get out of the contract, and they weren't letting us go. And I just kind of started retreating from the band, retreating into whatever I was doing, the relationships I had, the drugs I was doing. It was like I remember one night sitting at home watching The Simpsons, and it was time to leave, and like I didn't want to leave. Why can't I just watch this? And that's become one of my guidelines these days. If you'd rather be staying home watching TV than doing something, maybe you shouldn't be committed to doing that anymore. And I think that's pretty much what happened. That and just drug stuff for me led to like me leaving the Sorrows. I think I was given an ultimatum, and I just didn't comply. And that was the end of me and Sorrows.
Our contract was put in suspension, and that's kind of how it stayed. We lost touch basically with the record company, as it were. We just went along about our business, and that was the end of that. There was no talk about another album, obviously, because they were not accepting the band as it was at this point. And we stopped talking to one another, and it just kind of like went into a limbo. And in the meantime, the band kind of disintegrated, and I put an end to it, and I disbanded the group. So there was really nothing to talk about.
Did that album kill Sorrows? And it may have. We weren't which word? Not mature is not the word I'm looking for. I'm looking for a word. Um, hmm. I guess we just didn't have the facility to handle that kind of being gutted like that.
Now, fast forward 40 years, and through an act of Congress implemented this legislation, or an act. It's called Orphans Act, Orphan Works Act, or something like that, which basically give the right, because that story is so common in the music business, of people being signed to all kinds of deals that we had a divorce attorney doing our recording contract. You know, we didn't know our rest from our elbow. What's what. It's a recording contract. Who am I to argue with? You know, how many other recording contracts are going to come my way? You want me to sign here? Yeah, okay, I'll sign here, you know. So through this Orphan Works Act, people in that situation can reclaim their rights to their masters, to their publishing, to their songs after 35 years from the date they were first published. So we had to wait until 2000, what is it, 2011, I think? No, 2016 or 17 to reclaim our rights, at which point, you know, we had that in a can, and we started working on the re-release of this album. However, as I might have mentioned, by then our drummer Jet basically retired from playing, so that's why Lewis, my drummer from Arthur Alexander Band, he's been playing with us ever since Bad Times Good Times was released, and we were touring, and he kind of took over, and he's been with Sorrows ever since then. So he's playing also on a new album.
He had the energy and did a great job of replacing, playing along with whatever we were able to provide him with, and he played drums and replaced the dead thudding of the previous drummer. He's not what Jet would have done, obviously, in some places. A lot of time has passed. Drummers' styles and everything have changed. And trying to get him to do some of the stuff that Jet did was just like, it didn't work. But we brought a lot of energy and vitality to those tracks,
The ironic part is that I actually own the multi-tracks to the original Love Too Late album, and what would have been the easiest thing than just simply take that for us to do the parts that were basically we were replaced with, or redo whatever was needed to be redone, and that's it, we're done. As I started listening to this thing, it was just pure garbage. Okay, there's nothing, the drum parts were unusable from the playing standpoint and from the recording standpoint. The bass was unusable from the recording standpoint.
One or two of the tracks on the tape that the multi-track, I listened to, I was really surprised to hear there was like a room mic, that you picked up everything, the guitars. It's like very boxy sounding. It did not sound good at all, but it was just really interesting hearing the original, hearing us recording that, all of us together. And it's not, I can't even say that because Jet wasn't playing, so it wasn't Sorrows. It was never Sorrows without him playing. I got to say that, and in a sense, it's a lot closer to that with Weech playing, but it's still not. It's still because he was a big part of the feeling and how can I say it? The dynamics of the band had a lot to do with Jet.
So basically, I flew to New York, and Ricky Joe, I redid my vocals here. I did my vocals here because they didn't exist. And I went to New York and, got together with Joey and Ricky, and we did all the vocal harmonies and their lead vocals as they should have been and everything else.
Big difference between this album and the other one is overdubs. There's lots of musical, all of those musical flourishes that Arthur wanted to add on the original Love Too Late, the songs on Love Too Late, that he wasn't there to do, that were kind of replaced by Shel Talme's keyboards, and he was able to do in this record.
And in the meantime, the act, like I said, the Orphan Act took hold, and we were ready to do this. But it, needless to say, it took some work. Well, anyway, in the meantime, so the album was basically finished at that point, the new release of the album, and I was thinking and trying to figure out what to call it. I certainly did not want to call it Love Too Late as a re-release because it has nothing to do with the original. So at some point this thought came to me, why not call it Love Too Late, the real album, because that's basically what it is. Okay, And I fully understand that there will be people who actually own the original album, who grew up with it and this and that, to whom this album, the new album, will may potentially be a disappointment.
The author mostly produced this record, this new record, so it's going to have more of his imprint on it, his touch on the in the feel and the overall things. Now, a lot of the stuff that's on there, he intended to do on the original one. A lot of the overdubs.
When you grow up with something and it's like etched in your head, when you hear it all of a sudden, not the way you know it, reaction can be different. And I'm totally prepared for the fact that some people will say, yeah, well, it's nice, but I still like the original better. Even though now they know they've been listening to a fake for all these years. But so, such is life.
It is what it is, and it sounds great, and I love it. But I just wanted to say there's going to be a distinct difference in I don't know, thrust or something. I can't find a word for it, of these between these two albums. It is hot. It is definitely hot, and it's good that way.
So I just thought to myself, that's really the simplest way to call it for what it is, which is an album that's a real album, played by the real band, and playing it the way we would have played it had would have been allowed to play it. So when everything was finished, when the mixes were done, I started looking for a label to distribute it and handle it. And all of a sudden I had this kind of like an epiphany. Big Star Records. I mean, I can't think of a label that's more in sync with what we're doing than Rex and Christina and the whole profile of the label being essentially a power pop label, which we kind of feel like part of it. And there's also the history of my band, Arthur Alexander Band, playing Big Star gigs and having met them as people and stuff like that. And at this point in our career, my career, I'm not trying to be the next Elvis, and it's important to me to work with a label and people that I can actually enjoy working with. That we have some kind of a not just a musical connection, but human connection. And so I contacted Big Star, and they said, hell yeah. And I told them, when I said the shit shovel is coming out, I think it was either Rex or Christina or maybe even both. They said, let the shit fly. And that's when I knew I was home. That's the people. Those are the people I want to deal with, So that's where we're at now. And really looking forward to this. Waiting for all the stuff, all the elements to come together, artwork, and waiting for our mastering engineer to finish mastering the tracks. And stoked as hell, because it really came out beyond my expectations. It's just like all of a sudden it feels like no time has passed. It really kind of, it's a bittersweet feeling, because I don't know what, nobody will ever know what would have happened if we did what we were supposed to do.
I'm looking forward, to be honest. I'm really looking forward to seeing what folks who know Sorrows and who know that album think of it, and probably even more importantly, people who don't see what they think. Because really, when you get down to it, if there's going to be any future for Sorrows, it's going to be in the hands of those people who weren't around the first time around.
I'm just happy that we're at this point in our life with this record coming out, and things have been squared. Justice has been done. I think we did a great album. It's up to for people who never even heard the original, it'll be whatever it is. They will either like it or don't like it. And like I said, for people who have grown up or had the original, they will make up their own minds, and maybe they will like both. Either way, I'm fine with it. What's important to us is that we as a band have now created a legacy of what we were all about that really represents what we were all about, as opposed to having to live with this for the rest of our lives and never really kind of correcting it, you know? So, is that kind of like ending on a bum note? No?